Now I know what we're all thinking. Does this brand new Panasonic LUMIX G9 Mark II have a phase detection autofocus system in it? Yes, and it works a treat. Welcome back folks, my name's Shane. Welcome to the new studio. This is the first official video I've shot in this new space and I hope you like it. In today's video, we're checking out the long-awaited Panasonic G9 Mark II. That's right, we have a brand new micro four thirds camera, which is the most powerful micro four thirds camera on the market. Now the G9 was traditionally known as a photocentric camera with great but limited video features. The G9 Mark II is not only a great photographic camera, but it has all the power of the Panasonic GH6 with the form factor and body design of the S5 Mark II. At the time of filming, the G9 Mark II is priced at $1,899 in the US, which puts it about $300 lower than the Olympus OM1 and the Panasonic GH6. The new phase detection autofocus in the G9 Mark II works beautifully, and it's more advanced than even the S5 Mark II and X. In many ways, the G9 Mark II is the GH6 I think we're all waiting for. Furthermore, the G9 Mark II has the best in-body image stabilization that I've ever tested on an interchangeable lens camera system. It's crazy, it's almost approaching GoPro levels of stabilization, which is very impressive to say the least. Before we get started, a huge thank you to Panasonic for the loan of the LUMIX G9 Mark II. I don't get to keep it, no money's changed hands, and all thoughts about it are my own. This video will be quite long, so I'll timestamp each section down in the description if you want to skip ahead, back or forth. Let's cover what you need to know about the G9 Mark II. We get an all-new 25.2 megapixel sensor with a brand new image processor. Pair that with the full version of Vlog, and we get 13 plus stops of dynamic range. Like other new cameras from Lumix, the G9 Mark II supports the real-time LUT loader option that allows you to burn in a LUT at the time of filming. Let's cover the video frame rates and resolutions. The G9 Mark II allows you to shoot up to 5.8K open gate with a 4:3 aspect ratio in 420 10-bit. There's also the same 5.7K at 30 and 60p that offers that 17:9 aspect ratio in the MOV menu. The standard DCI 4K and 4K UHD modes all support 30, 60, and 120 frames per second. And if you're in PAL, that'll be 25, 50, and 100. And these are all full sensor readouts, unless you're using some of the advanced IBIS features, which we'll cover in just a moment. The Panasonic G9 Mark II is essentially a 10-bit camera only. There's only a few 8-bit codecs in the MP4 menu, but the MOV file format is full of just about every resolution and aspect ratio under the sun. In addition to the MOV and MP4 options, we now have the ability to shoot Apple ProRes either internal in HD or 1080p, and then we can go externally to an SSD via the USB port on the side, all the way up to 4K and 5.7K with a 17:9 aspect ratio. There's no restrictions or penalties for using any of these modes. Unlike the original G9, which had recording limits, there's none on this whatsoever. The G9 Mark II has done away with the dynamic range boost feature we found in the GH6. This is where you get an extra stop of dynamic range in the highlights by turning that DR boost on. Now, DR boost worked in some modes and not others, and having a grayed out wasn't always ideal if the shooting mode didn't support it. The G9 Mark II gives you a seamless dynamic boost mode experience, essentially having it on the entire time unless you're shooting above 60p. This means that your ISO also won't ramp up to 2000 automatically, making shooting without an ND filter much easier on the new camera. This new automatic mode is less confusing while still giving you the full benefit of the dynamic range without finding it in the menu or mapping it to a button on the back of the camera. When you switch to 4K 120, for example, you'll still get the standard 12 stops of the sensor, but anything 60p and under will offer the full 13 plus stops. This is a much better integration of DR boost. The G9 Mark II also supports anamorphic filmmaking, and it has the same great tools that you'd find in the GH6. This includes waveform, vector scope, anamorphic D-squeeze. Tools like the framing markers and linear focus mode for manual focus are all included. The menu is dense, and after looking at it, it feels very much the same as the GH6, which is great. When it comes to color science, the G9 Mark II is full of the usual Panasonic picture profiles with some new additions. When comparing the G9 to the GH6 and S5 Mark II, it leans more towards the S5 Mark II, and it's not quite as saturated as the GH6. Either way, the natural picture profile is close enough that matching them in post won't be a problem. There's a number of different picture profiles that really caught my eye on this camera, including natural, which is my favorite, and I'm shooting on that now, portrait, Cine V2, which I think looks fantastic, and Cine D2. If you like to shoot in black and white, we have a brand new color profile called Leica Mono, which looks fantastic. It has a higher contrast look to it and it really pops. Now, if your workflow already includes shooting in the All-Intra codecs, the G9 has you covered. If you're unfamiliar with All-Intra, it makes your editing experience a whole lot easier as it's way less compressed than your typical H.264 or 265 file. Now just know if you plan on shooting in All-Intra, you will use more data on your SD card or external drive. It really does fill it up quite quickly, but the option's there if you want to shoot with it. This goes all the way up to 4K. Like most Lumix cameras, the HD 1080p footage is excellent. Here's an example of what 1080p footage looks like upscaled on a 4K project's timeline. The only time the HD footage falls apart is in the highest S&Q frame rates of 300p. So unless you really need a shot in HD 300p, stick to 4K 120, it's so much nicer. The handling of the G9 Mark II is excellent and it has the same dust and splash-proof design as the S5 Mark II. We get the same great grip found on the S5 Mark II, the same custom function buttons, dials, EVF, and flippy screen. It's kind of like a mini S5 Mark II if you haven't worked it out by now. Thanks to the camera having a robust heatsink, Panasonic has done away with the active cooling, allowing this to be lighter and smaller than the GH6. In place of the active cooling, there's a brand new gyro sensor which helps improve the IBIS system. Another reason the G9 Mark II is smaller than the GH6 is we finally get a set of matching UHS-2 SD card slots. Again, this is pretty much the same as the S5 Mark II. I much prefer matching card slots, and while the CF Express Type B is faster for burst photography, and when it comes to clearing the buffer, my V90 cards have performed great in this camera. If you plan on shooting in ProRes in 4K or all the way up to 5.7K, an external SSD is required, as you can only shoot in the HD modes internally. Much like the S5 Mark II, this allows you also to back up to both SD card slots at the same time or choose what is allocated to either. On the back of the camera, we get an all-new 8-way joystick, so this has been upgraded over the original G9. We also get a headphone output and a 3.5mm audio input jack. On the side, we now get a full-size HDMI port. This is appreciated as you don't need any specialty dongles or cables or anything. Simply plug your HDMI cable in and you're good to go. The HDMI info display is still the same as it is with the S5 Mark II, which means you can't mirror it for some reason. You can't see all the info on the screen and on your external monitor at the same time. Older Lumix cameras gave you the option to mirror the info display on both screens. This only allows you to see it on one or the other. You can also get a clean HDMI signal out of this camera when it comes to live streaming. Speaking of live streaming, the G9 Mark II doesn't have the same live streaming functionality that was found in the GH5 Mark II, so you'll be hooking this up to a capture card. I'll leave my capture card recommendations down in the description box below for the stuff that I actually use. Like the S5 Mark II, there's an S&Q option on the top of the dial. This allows you to pre-program your favorite slow motion setting and recall it in an instant. S&Q mode does remove the audio, but there's also plenty of options with audio just in the standard menu. So if you need 4K at 120 frames per second with audio, you can get it just in the main menu, and then you can slow it down in Final Cut or whatever editing software you use. Now let's cover battery and runtime. So the battery in this is the same DMW BLK22 as found in the S5, S5 Mark II and GH6. Now if you have a couple of the old G9 and GH5 batteries, just know they won't fit in this, but the new battery type will fit in the older camera systems and will give you additional runtime. Let's talk about battery life and overheating. So at 4K 25 frames per second, I was able to record non-stop without any overheating for 2 hours and 27 minutes before the battery completely died. Now shooting at 4K 50 or 60 frames if you're in North America, I was able to record non-stop for 1 hour and 54 minutes. The camera was a little bit warmer, but guess what? It wasn't hot and it didn't overheat. So this is fantastic. We only lost about 30 minutes or so. Interestingly enough though, shooting at 4K 100 frames per second, I was just shy of 30 minutes. It was 28 minutes 32 before the camera did finally overheat. So as long as you're not shooting for half an hour at 4K 100 or 120p, I don't think you'll have a problem. I also shot in 5.7K for over an hour outside in 2 to 3 minute bursts with no overheating warnings or anything. I had the camera in direct sunlight and the entire time it worked without incident. I actually had planned to shoot this entire video outside until I realized that my other wireless pack was faulty. I got home and I can't use any of the footage. So some of those samples you're seeing on screen were from the first time I shot this video. Much like the original G9, you can still charge the battery internally, but you now have the option of running the camera indefinitely thanks to the USB-C power delivery option. If you have a dummy battery for the S5 or S5 Mark II, those are also compatible with this camera. Let's cover the autofocus in the G9 Mark II and what you can expect. So I tested this out with a number of different lenses in various lighting conditions and situations. And after hours of testing the autofocus, it's a notch above the S5 Mark II and X. Let's take a look at how confident the autofocus is when shooting with the Lumix 42.5mm f1.7 prime at 1.7. As you can see, the focus pull is fantastic. This footage was shot using Vlog and graded using the Panasonic Nicest LUT. Not long ago, I posted a full review of this 42.5mm lens using the Panasonic GH6, and one of my biggest complaints with it was the subject tracking wasn't very good with the contrast DFD. And that's not news to anybody. But the great news is now all of the older lenses that I've tested with the G9 Mark II will perform like we always wanted them to. So well done Panasonic for getting on board with a phase detect autofocus system that works as well as it does. Furthermore, the G9 Mark II phase detection can also track animals even way back in the frame. I shot this clip at 5.7K and the swan was tracked the entire time until it went behind the reeds. A yellow box came up on the screen as soon as there was an animal detected in the frame, and it tracks great. Animal eye detection also worked well when the subject was closer to the camera. Like before, a yellow box comes up letting you know that the eye is in focus. If it can't find an eye, it defaults back to body tracking. I found that the animal body detection worked great for ducks, swans, or horses, no matter how far back they were in the frame. Also included is car and motorcycle tracking. Now, I was unable to find any motorbikes at the time of filming, but the car tracking is excellent. It will lock onto a moving subject and again track perfectly with a yellow box confirming focus. Now, if there's more than one car in the shot, other cars will come up with a white box and you can switch to the other cars just by tapping on the selfie screen, and the white box will then switch to yellow and start tracking perfectly. Now, if you plan on doing any type of product showcase, the mode that I just explained is what I'm using in the studio here. So if I hold this up over my face, it's going to switch, and as I release it, it's going to go back to my face. This works beautifully. I've tested this out a whole bunch of times. There's plenty of different modes you can go through on the camera to sort of fine tune it for your particular settings. But this human tracking and then placing something over your face or body seems to work really well. So that's what I leave it on. I really want to put the autofocus through its paces, so I had Rhiannon be heavily backlit in a few shots and it worked flawlessly. I also tried some low light subject tracking and it had no issues when the subject was facing the camera. Now, subject tracking did lose Rhiannon a few times when she turned away, but it appeared to latch straight back on when she turned around again. When shooting in some of the higher frame rates, above 120 frames per second, the camera defaults back to manual focus. While this won't be ideal for everyone, I have no problems with this personally. The new and improved autofocus also translates over to photography. It's a no-brainer being that it's a G9 Mark II. Whether you're taking a single shot or spraying and praying in a burst rate mode, the hit rate was excellent. While I wasn't pushing the autofocus in photography mode to the limit, what I can see from these burst shots is the focus is spot on, even with a moving subject. The G9 now offers a maximum of 60 frames per second when shooting in burst mode with continuous autofocus on, and 75 frames per second when using manual focus. Unlike the previous G9, this is the full resolution photograph capturing a 25 megapixel image. If you're shooting sports or wildlife, there's also a pre-burst mode that allows you to capture the action either half a second, 1 second, or 1.5 seconds before hitting the actual shutter. The G9 Mark II now offers the same handheld high resolution mode as found in the GH6. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this mode, the camera takes a series of photos by moving the sensor just slightly and combining them in camera. The end result is a whopping 100 megapixel image. It's crazy. This is all done in camera and there's no need for external software. There's also two modes you can choose from within the handheld high resolution mode. The first is for static subjects and the second is when there's motion in the frame, like water or trees. Let's talk about the in-body image stabilization or IBIS system. So this is the best I've seen on any camera, offering up to 8 stops of image stabilization. The G9 Mark II actually moves ahead of the GH6 and the S5II or X. It's just mind-blowing how well this stabilizes your footage. Pairing this Lumix 12 to 35mm f2.8, this is the version 2, with the G9 Mark II, gave me almost GoPro-like results, and this was without even turning on the E-stabilization. Now, the E-stabilization is something I would normally avoid on Lumix cameras, but on the G9 Mark II, it works for helping remove the warping that you'd usually see on the edges of frame, especially when using wide-angle lenses. Now, there's two modes, standard, which is a slight crop, and high, which is a further crop. Even with the 6mm f2 Mikey lens, the corners are free from flapping. That's a technical term, by the way. With the E-stabilization off, you'll still get excellent results with a 10 or 12mm lens, but as you can see from these examples, the E-stabilization actually works, and it makes the shots even better. Let's compare the G9 Mark II up against my Sony FX30 using the high E-stabilization mode versus the Sony FX30's active steady shot. As you can see, the footage on the G9 Mark II looks way more stable straight out of camera without adding any type of post-processing. So the win goes to the Panasonic. Let's cover low light performance. Now, while this isn't a strength of micro four thirds due to the small sensor, you can definitely make it work if you shoot within a reasonable ISO range. I compared the G9 Mark II against my Sony FX30, which is an APS-C sensor camera, and I was pleased with the results. I was able to get solid results up to ISO 3200, and if you need to, you can add some noise reduction processing in camera. What you're looking at is all stock, and the noise is slightly less obvious on the G9 Mark II than on the FX30. At ISO 1600, the FX30 actually has a larger noise pattern, but at 4000 and above, the win goes to the Sony. Up next is audio. So unlike the original G9, the G9 Mark II is now compatible with the DMW XLR adapter. This is a 2-channel XLR hot shoe adapter that allows you to record using shotgun mics directly to the camera. Panasonic has also upgraded the G9 Mark II to support 4 channels of audio, so you can blend the 3.5mm audio jack with the external mics, or even use the built-in onboard microphones. Like the GH5II and GH6, we can now reduce the preamps to -18 dB. We can also set the threshold from standard to low if we need more headroom. The menu system is identical to most of the modern Panasonic cameras. If you've used any of them from the Panasonic GH5 onwards, you'll feel right at home on this. We can navigate using the touchscreen, wheel, or joystick on the back of the camera. Tapping the display button brings up all of our settings in real time, allowing you to change whatever you like nice and easily. Let's cover the pros and cons. Overall, the G9 Mark II is an excellent camera. I love the fact that Panasonic has moved micro four thirds forward with a release that will no doubt appeal evenly to videographers, content creators, and photographers. The new autofocus system is snappy and reliable, and it works with all of the existing Lumix lenses that I've tested so far. More on that in a future video. Given the G9 Mark II's price of $1,899, I have a hard time recommending the GH6 over this as someone who's filming this angle on a GH6. This has pretty much everything that that camera has, plus the new addition of better IBIS, better autofocus, and it's a few $100s less expensive. If you're a content creator looking for a micro four thirds camera you can plonk on a tripod or take out into the field, I would have a hard time not recommending this over all of the other options. This is a really powerful camera. In a studio situation like this, I can highly recommend the G9 Mark II. I'm going to replace this shot with the camera right now so you can get a good sense of how it looks, and it should look almost every bit as good as this full frame camera, as I'm only shooting at ISO 320. Now, there was only one mode where I noticed some Moire on my shirt, and that was 5.7K with that 17:9 aspect ratio. I shot in open gate, 1080p and 4K up to 120 frames per second, and I didn't notice it whatsoever. It was just in that one mode. Now, I don't know if this was an anomaly or whatever the case was, but it was definitely worth mentioning. I also didn't notice any of the streaking issues found in the GH6. This is where lines would appear in the shot if you were filming in this exact situation. Now, if you plan on upgrading from a G9 to a G9 Mark II and you love to manual focus, there's one feature that is missing from this camera, which puts it right in line with the S5, S5 Mark II, GH6 and GH5 Mark II, and that's the tap to manual focus option. So this is where you'd lock the camera to manual focus, swipe the selfie screen, and it would lock on a point. That functionality is not here anymore. Unfortunately now, or all you have to do now is tap the AF on button on the back and it will lock focus. So you don't swipe anymore. You can still create a box and move it around in that mode, but you have to push the AF on button to lock it onto a point. In regular shooting conditions, the performance of this new sensor is simply stunning. I was able to capture some of the most beautiful and dynamic shots so far with both native and third-party Sirui lenses, as you can see from these examples. The smaller form factor of this camera will definitely appeal to folks who found the GH6 too big, and for folks who didn't want to go full frame. I could easily see this being an A or B camera for content creators, filmmakers, or photographers. I love the fact that this autofocus system doesn't make all of my lens lineup redundant. So if you, like me, and you've got a bunch of great micro four thirds lenses, Panasonic Sigma or Olympus, if they support autofocus, you're going to get better results out of this over any other camera in the lineup. At the end of the day, this is a win-win for micro four thirds users. This camera is fantastic and I've thoroughly enjoyed my time with it. I'm going to be buying one of these, being the camera addict that I am, but I really love it. And pair this with something like a 15mm f1.7 or this 12 to 35 f2.8, which is the 24 to 70 equivalent, and you've got yourself a super compact rig with excellent stabilization, killer autofocus, improved battery life. What's not to love, right? It's cool. Thanks again to Panasonic for the loan of this. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will have my autofocus video up very soon, as well as a deep dive video on how to set this up for filmmaking. Thanks again. Catch you soon. See ya.